don't unmute or put your camera on if we do allow that. But again, we will be recording throughout and making it available to everyone afterwards. Otherwise, I think we're due to begin. We're just 1 minute past. So I'll hand back to you, panel.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Donovan. Well, a huge warm welcome to you all today, and thank you very much for joining what is the second session of the Volunteer Conference, which is a 4-day virtual event at the institution. This second session leads nicely on from the first, which unpacked the principles around volunteering. Is about understanding IMechE volunteers and why it matters. We're looking to have a chat and have a conversation around this for about an hour in total. As I mentioned just slightly earlier, please make this as interactive as possible. It's your chance to understand more about the institution. And we hope, myself, Peter and Graham, to demystify some of the aspects of IMechE and unpack more about the governance and that volunteering community here at the organisation. And also to maybe really dig into a bit about what it can offer people. Why do we all volunteer? What do we get out of it? As well as being important for the institution, why it's important for you guys too. So very keen to hear your views around that. As we mentioned, if you've got any questions, happy to answer them all the way through the session. We've got some slides, but please put your hands up, go in the chat. We won't wait till the end for any questions. We'd like this to be as interactive as possible. And just a reminder, as Donovan said, this has been recorded and will be shared not only to the delegates today, but also to the wider volunteer community as part of the volunteer conference. So I think firstly, I think it'd be nice to get to know a little bit more about us and the panel. So if we go to the next slide, thanks, Donovan. I'd like to hand over to Graham to introduce himself.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think there's a couple of people I know who've popped in. So if I say anything that isn't quite right, please kind of correct me. So I had to check when my journey started, and I spoke to some of Joe's colleagues, and it was a long time ago, back in 1984, when I started to be involved in the organisation. And I won't read through there, but I've found myself at various different times through the last sort of 30 or 40 years getting involved with the institution. And I think that Joe asked me to sit here because of the range of different things which I do at the moment in terms of different parts of the institution, and they're not actually all mentioned there. So from my perspective, what I hope to be able to bring to this is the breadth of different types of things that people can get involved with, and I'm the kind of the living example of that. So there's not just one size fits all, but if one thing's what suits you, then great. But there's lots of different opportunities across a whole range of different parts of the organisation.
Thank you very much, Graham. And you'll see we have Peter online, who's live from the US of A this morning, for him anyway. So welcome, Peter, and if you would just like to introduce yourself.
Hello. So I've got I probably am at the other end from Graham in terms of experience within the IMechE. I kind of joined up when I started university in 2011. I then became chartered last year, and I've been doing STEM outreach and that sort of stuff since I graduated. But then I've been much more involved heavily in the last year within the IMechE, and I represent a different side of what is involved and also levels of experience. So when we ask about how the IMechE works, Graham's a cracking one, and for me, in some ways, I'm looking at how we can best serve everyone, how we can involve everyone, how we can get everyone on board, and that's the big thing for me. So I've got that perspective on things.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Peter. Anna, thank you for getting up so early.
No problem at all.
And lastly, just myself. I'm Joe Horton. I've worked at the IMechE for over 20 years, for those that know me online, and I've just found it so rewarding working with the members and the volunteers, and I've learned an awful lot of skills and experiences along that way, and very much enjoy it. Outside of IMechE, I'm a keen gardener, just to let you know a little bit about me, and I have a little allotment where I try to grow the odd vegetable, but not always that successfully, I might add.
Where are your fingers, Joe?
I don't want to show you my nails now. So that was just a little bit about us, just to understand, our backgrounds, but please share in the chat, anything about your own volunteering experiences, what you do for the organisation. It'd be nice to share that along the way. So just to move on, What I want to do next is just to remind us all about why we're here, why we do what we do. For those who were on the session this morning, or those who've seen some of our recent communications, that we are developing a longer term strategy for IMechE. So instead of looking at, you know, the next 2-3 years, this is about a 5, 10, 20-year vision for the organisation. And it's really important that we focus on making sure we have this in place so that we're all on the same page. We act in unity, both the staff and the members, and that we work together. So we've kept it quite simple, as you can see there, 2 clear goals: developing and supporting engineers and technicians, and maximising the impact of our members. So very straightforward, but huge amount of work to unpack there, an awful lot of ideas that we want to roll out with you and the rest of the members over the next 5, 10, 15 years. In terms of how we want to do this, we have 4 values, which are listed there on the right-hand side: inclusion, integrity, impact, and innovation. And that's how we want to achieve our goals, and the way we have the values sitting at the heart of IMechE. Next slide, Donovan, thank you. So you're thinking, well, where do volunteers fit into all this? What's the scenario look like? Well, to ensure we can deliver on our strategic goals, we need to have some real strong pillars and foundations in place. And we call them here at the institution strategic enablers, which is a business term, but this is about having the right foundations, cornerstones, underpinning everything that we do. And the volunteers and the members are such an important part of that community. So as you see, part of the 7 strategic enablers, one of them there is having a community of well-supported and engaged professional staff and volunteers working in close partnership. And I think hopefully this is a good testament to that with Graham here today and Peter online. It's about us working as a team to try and explore volunteering here today. But I might just throw it to Graham and Peter at this point, just to sort of ask your experience, like, what is it that, you know, what was your experience about how you first became involved? What did you find it? What were the challenges? What were the opportunities? Just maybe to explore a little bit about how you came into the volunteer world at IMechE.
I'll kick off, Peter. So I knew you were going to ask me this question, Joe, and I actually don't remember that much, but there was one specific thing which I do remember, where in one of the kind of the outputs from the organisation many years ago, there was a little line that said, "Are you interested in volunteering?" And I thought, yeah, I am. And I engaged with that particular little topic and said, yeah. And I think a lot of people think that you need to be tapped on the shoulder. Somebody needs to approach you. It would be good if, and that does happen. But absolutely, this is about, you know, people actually sort of saying, I'd like to do this for lots of different reasons, and actually just engaging. And so part of the process is about, do you want to do it yourself? It's not, the institution may or may not engage directly with you, but I think for me it was about saying, yeah, I quite like to do that. And there was a little bit of a hook there, which I was able to hang on to. And since then, I've found lots of different types of opportunities within the organisation, which I get, you know, a huge amount of benefit out of.
Thank you, Graham. Peter?
I think for me, I'm again a wee bit different journey from Graham. I worked for an organisation which had a charitable foundation attached to it, and there's a huge amount of STEM outreach work done within that. And that, if I wasn't being an engineer, I'd be a teacher. So I have always been drawn really into helping out and kind of teaching and supporting kind of the next generation. And within the organisation I was previously in, that was very easy. And I kind of set up a scheme to set up engineering clubs. And I set up a scheme for reuse of old laptops to go to schools. And I was able to I was very heavily supported by the organisation and the foundation to do that. And when I then left that organisation, I found it very difficult to do the same thing with the same kudos behind me. So without that name behind me, you were just a weird guy looking to help out a school, and that made it very, very difficult to do what I wanted, and made it very difficult to do how I wanted to do things. And therefore, aligning with an organisation like the IMechE, who had supported me previously through my education, that I really wanted to then A, give something back to something where I had been supported by, and then B, also kind of, it gave me a wee bit of backing to go and do a whole bunch of stuff within schools from there.
Thank you, Peter. That's really interesting. Actually, just hadn't thought of that point of view where you have this sort of organizational brand behind you to give you that introduction that you might not have as an individual. That's a really interesting point. Thank you, Pete. Just looking at the chat, we've got a comment from Ian about sharing the slides. Yes, absolutely. Very good point, Ian. We'll make sure through Donovan and his team that they'll be available, not just to you guys, but to the others as well. And actually, if it's for Scottish members, you might be able to ask Graham here, who's based in Scotland, to come along and help with the unpacking this for the committee members themselves.
And just to start making this a little bit more interactive. So I know Ian well. Ian and I sit on the Scottish Centre for the Railway Division, and we will be putting together an event on Wednesday evening. So I'll see Ian on Wednesday evening, and yeah, no problem giving you the slides.
Brilliant. Right, so what we're going to do next is just trying to demystify some of our structures, our volunteering opportunities, just to try and be more transparent about what we do. So there's a few organograms coming up, so bear with us. Hopefully you can read what's on the slide, but I appreciate there is small text, but as we said, we'll send these around after. But essentially, our governance structure is based or in line with the Charity Commission. We are a charity and a professional body, and therefore we align our structures around that. It's headed by a group of trustees, known as our trustee board, and they are responsible and accountable for the organisation, maybe looking at strategy, governance and finance, probably being the three top key areas to look at, all chaired by our president, who's currently Phil Peel, who I believe is online as well, looking at the chat function there. And these trustee board are elected from the membership and voted for by the membership, so a very important part of the institution. And you'll find that most of our trustees have gone through a journey a bit like Graham and Pete, of volunteering before they became trustees in other parts of the IMechE. There are basically two types of boards and committees. I'm trying to simplify it here in terms of our governance and advisory boards, which are set there mainly because it's what's required under the Charity Commission. But as you can see by the titles there, all extremely important topics within IMechE, looking at our long-term strategy, looking at making sure we're doing things well through our audit and risk and that we're compliant, making sure we're looking after our finances, and also sort of some of our more later topics around diversity inclusion, making sure we're doing things in the right way linked to our values. But in there's an important group called Council, and Council are one of our advisory bodies made up of representatives from around our member network, so really representing members and volunteers, and that's a very important body, part of the institution. The other side of the organisation is what we call the operating boards, and they really do as well. I mean, governance do a lot of hard work, but in terms of, you know, on the ground, grassroots, fantastic activities for IMechE. This is where we see it through the operating boards, and you can see from some of the titles there. There's member sections, education, the technical strategy, which is around skills and industries, which we're going to talk about in a few moments, engineering heritage, further education and skills, and then importantly our qualifications and membership board, which helps us with all the volunteers support us through membership, which we'll unpack a little bit later. So there's around, we're thinking around 6,000 volunteers in this structure, so a huge number of people involved, and that's the volunteer side. Yep.
I'm going to ask a question, and because I'm here, I can do that quite easily.
Yep.
So this looks quite daunting, Joe. Roughly speaking, you've mentioned 6,000 volunteers. Very roughly speaking, on the right-hand column, I'm thinking that's probably a few hundred.
Yes.
And on the left-hand side, it's several thousand. So I think for people who are looking at this, the vast majority of opportunities of the work that is done is on the left-hand set of columns, as opposed to the right-hand set. It's not to say the right-hand aren't important, but that's what perhaps sees quite a lot of airtime, because it is part of our governance structure. A lot of the communications that the institution puts out looks at that side of things. But in reality, a lot of the work and a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the benefits are actually delivered by the stuff on the left-hand side. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think just to be transparent, and there's opportunities for members to get involved in every section on that screen. There are no limits to getting involved. And there are a number of processes, but I think certainly from this morning's session, we sort of learned about how we make this more transparent and welcoming. I think there was certainly feedback from this morning about how do we turn an organogram into something real and sensible and sort of makes sense for the sort of average member, so to speak, which I think is really important. I know both of you, Graham and Peter, you've been involved in at this level, haven't you? I think Graham, you're at Qualifications and Membership Board, and Peter at the International Young Members Committee, I believe, isn't it? And how did, just out of interest, just to share with the audience, how did you get involved at this governing sort of operating level, as opposed to, you know, we talk about the grassroots up in Scotland or in New Zealand, etc.
I can crack on. It's really interesting. I think it'll be, again, I think a lot of this is the contrast between both Graham and I's experience, which is cracking for everyone to understand. I think outside of the UK and outside of the big central hubs of where the IMechE has a large number of members, there's less people on the ground. So in New Zealand, there's less people on the ground than there would be in the UK. And I was looking for this kind of opportunity to have some backing from kind of a big name, so therefore going into schools is much easier and helping out is much easier. And I got in touch with a local board, and it was just after I'd gone through my chartership with actually someone who was on the board. And during my chartership interview, they were like, "Oh, so if you're interested, we should catch up after about this, about kind of going on to the helping out on the kind of Oceania board, which is kind of the group overseeing the kind of Oceania region." And from there, it kind of all tumbled into being on the Oceania group, and then being on the International Young Members Committee, and then from there being here, and then hopefully some more bits where I can help out as much as possible.
Brilliant, thank you, Graham.
I'm preempting one of the slides that I know is coming up, which looks at qualifications and membership. So I sit as the vice chair on the Qualifications and Membership Board, and it's how did I get here? And I actually started off interviewing, which I think that might have been the little line that I saw in one of the probably paper organisations charts that the organisation sent out back in the, I'm going to say in the 1990s, possibly early noughties. And I started to interview. I really enjoyed it. I found it fantastic to speak to other people, to understand a little bit about their world, because we all can live in a little bit of a bubble, our bit of engineering. And what I was hearing from people about completely different things. And I found that really, really fascinating. And I thought, wow, didn't understand that. And I still have some very, very vivid memories. I won't tell you about them, but there are two particular interviews which I can remember, even though they were 20 years ago, and really, really sort of rich and just fantastic experiences. I did that for a number of years, and I thought, where does this fit in? And I sort of then realised that the interviewers all fit together into what's called the Professional Review Committee. Now, that's not on this chart. We'll see it a little bit later, but the Professional Review Committee forms part of a very, very structured and rigorous process whereby we admit potential engineers onto the Engineering Council register. And I worked on that, and that was getting involved in not specifically interviewing, but the really complex cases where things weren't normal, looking about how we develop the process, about how we do these sorts of things. And that was fantastically rewarding. But I recognised I needed to move on. I found a successor who I'd worked with, and he took over from me. And then I moved into the Qualifications and Membership Board a couple of years ago. And that sits as a group of 13 committees, of which the Professional Review Committee is one of them. So I've been sitting on the Qualifications and Membership Board for a couple of years now, completely different, involved in a much broader area of the institution. I find myself getting involved with university accreditations and all sorts of different things, all to do with this process. But I don't want to kind of preempt what we're going to talk about later, Joe. But that was just how I found myself involved in that. Professionally, I've worked a lot in the rail industry. The institution has a railway division, and we sort of fit together quite nicely, where people in that industry fit very neatly into what the institution has to offer.
Just going on that question, Graham and Peter, I'm just thinking that it's really interesting stories you've got. So, and is there any lessons learned for IMechE going forward in terms of how much did you think you had to search out volunteering opportunities through this route, or how much was presented, or was it transparent enough? I think I'm hearing that actually you searched out and found the opportunities, but do you think we could be more transparent in the opportunities we have, or could we message it differently? I'm hearing sort of an interesting line here.
We're sitting here today and we're doing that messaging.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of this. But the fact that we feel as if we need to sit here to do that means that we need to do more. And I think that we absolutely need to do more, because it's not clear. There are thousands of opportunities, but it's very, very difficult. Apart from perhaps some of the do you want to be a trustee? Do you want to be a council member? A lot of them are pretty hidden away. And so that there's opportunities for us to do a huge amount more in terms of signposting people towards things. And I'm not a fan of writing job descriptions, which we might do in a corporate environment, to sort of say, because we want people to bring different skill sets. And if we were to write a job description, people say, well, that's not me. But actually, that person who's not me might be the exact person that you need to be able to actually integrate and to diversify what we're trying to do. So it's the people who don't fit, aren't like me, are absolutely people that we want. And how do we go about actually getting them?
Brilliant, thank you. I'd like to, if you wish to sort of put in the chat about how you first got involved with IMechE, did you see an advert? Did you go along to your local group? Or did you go through the routes that Peter and Graham went through? So it'd be interesting just to get some feedback from you guys on the chat about how you first got involved. Or if you haven't been involved, maybe there's a question there around what you would like to get involved with if you find this interesting at the end there. So just to make this a bit more real, there's a nice organogram on there, but what does it, so I've got my, just one second. This is the organogram at the top level, but what does this really mean in reality? What do the activities look like? So just going on to our next slide, Donovan. One of our major areas of the institution is about our industries and specialisms. I suspect that many members get involved initially in IMechE and through this route, in working in their own companies, but then connect with IMechE in some way, either attending a conference or being asked to volunteer in some kind or other. We have 18 divisions and groups that have a real strong history with IMechE and offer a huge portfolio of activities. We've used the word community here today, as you can see, because we really feel that we are one large community of engineers, but also we have smaller communities based on specialisms, geography, demographics, etc., which we're going to explore a little bit here today. But I think the important point here is that if your interests are linked to your industry specialisms, then get involved. There's opportunities there, and I think both Peter and Graham have done that through their own route through railway. And Peter, what's your background in terms of your specialism?
I'm initially was doing kind of power and generation, so I worked at power plants, so I'd be in the power and energy for the first couple of years, and then I worked in consumer electronics, which I'm not sure is here. It was kind of design and innovation, and then now I'm in automotive, so I work on electric vehicles and have done for the last 5 or so years.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think the volunteer roles within this community really greatly vary. I think that's an important thing to say. There's one from getting involved locally, Railway Scotland, I think we've seen on the chat today, but also we run a whole range of national and international conferences and seminars where we're looking for people to sit on the organising committees and support there in terms of making sure we get the right content for that event, but also they're also looking for speakers to present at those events, to be on panel sessions like this, etc. And also that there's also the number of like technical tours, there's awards and scholarships linked to all of these. So it's not just one type of volunteering. I think it's important to say and demonstrate that you can volunteer for 1 hour once a year or 100 hours or more. There's such variety. We were saying in the session earlier today that perhaps in the past we've been quite traditional in our types of volunteering, and it maybe felt a bit daunting, and B, that you were on a committee for life. And I think we need to change that perception, and it's up to the individual.
I think that to that point, Joe, one of the things which a number of the committees have done over the last couple of years is and this is going to sound a little bit kind of heavy, but have put together terms of reference. And one of the key things within that terms of reference is tenure. That actually that there's now a requirement that you can only spend so long as part of that committee. And I think that's really important because it actually forces the institution to refresh. And you know, I found myself timing out, but going to do something else. You know, there's a within one of the small committees which I run, we've got a guy who sits as part of the engineering council. He's the international rep, but he's timed out. So in the early part of next year, we will be going to the volunteer community saying we're looking for somebody to do this type of job. Now, it's quite specialised, but for the right sort of person, it's fantastic. So there really is huge amount of opportunity. And I think as we grow and recognise this is not a job for life, you don't have to do it forever. And actually, there's more benefit to be had by changing what you do, by actually moving within the various parts of the volunteer structure. And what I found myself doing is bringing best practice from one group and putting it into another. And there's no perfect way of doing things. We can all learn. And I think the institution is starting to recognise that perhaps some of the silos need to be broken down.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, that leads me on to looking at the chats. It's a really
we've got a couple of good questions in there actually. So just to draw your attention to one from Jack down Devon and Cornwall. He said that this year there feels to be more of a focus on volunteering. Previously, committees have felt rather isolated to the main HQ, which is quite a topical one. Has there been a change in the HQ structure to put a focus on volunteers?
It's a really good question, Jack, and I think your observations are correct. I think there hasn't been as much focus, perhaps, or in a focused way previously, but I think now that we are developing through the members a longer term strategy and some real key foundations, we understand what foundations and pillars we need to make that happen. We need to ensure that one of them is about really supporting our volunteers and working in unity with the staff to make a difference, to achieve our strategy going forward. So I think your comment is correct, that there's a bit more emphasis, perhaps a different, not so much maybe as change in structure, but certainly more of an emphasis. Okay.
How many staff does the IMechE have?
Good question.
Roughly.
Yeah, I think we have just under 200, but that includes in our commercial businesses as well. Yeah.
So if we don't include the commercial businesses.
Let's go for 100, but
Okay.
don't quote me on that.
No, but I think what I'm trying to do there is to say that there's 100 full-time staff and 6,000, and I actually think 6,000 is light.
It could be.
So the vast majority of things that get done by the volunteers, and we shouldn't sort of run away from that. The staff are critical, but so are the volunteers, and we have to work together, because if we don't work together, it just won't work.
Yeah, I think so. Pete, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would mirror that. I think that it's such an interesting thing because you have an organisation which is a large percentage of work, and I don't want to get into numbers there, but it's done by volunteers, and the vast majority of the kind of outreach work will be done by volunteers on the ground. And it then means that when you get involved, you get to shape what being on the ground and doing it your way and doing it how you want and how you best see it happening. And I think that as much as people may criticize the institution, I think that there is a large scope for being able to do it the way you want. And that is probably very different from how people see the rest of their careers, where you probably go into a job and your boss tells you how and what to do, and there's less of a scope for how you do that. Whereas at the IMechE, there's a huge scope to do kind of a very open scope, just like Graham was saying, that you bring your own special spice flavour. And that's kind of the best bit about what you bring, is that you bring a different approach. So I'm going to, when I rock up to events, I click with certain people. And when Graham rocks up to certain events, he's going to click with other certain people. And that's what's really great about having that diversity of people coming in, and that inclusion of as many people as we can have really makes the kind of the power of the organization better, because you then get to communicate better across that group. And that's the big thing for me, is that there's all these specialisms, but me talking about rail, I don't know how many of you were on before this, me chatting about rail to Graham's been one of the more interesting conversations I'll probably have in my work week. Because I work with the same kind of guys all week and same kind of women all week, where I want to try and kind of vary that up if possible.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I've just noticed a comment from Andrew Menmuir. He's exactly the type of person that we want to be able to converse with. So Andrew's was kind of come on to this. Fantastic, thank you for that. You've been involved to perhaps a little bit behind the scenes, and the work you've done has been fantastic. So you're exactly the type of person that we want to be able to have conversations with. We can do it here, or we can do it offline, whatever suits you, Andrew. If you want to have a discussion here, more than happy to do that. Don't know if Donovan can switch you on or not. I don't know how practical that is. or we can do it offline. I'm more than happy to have a separate discussion with you, and we can see what are the types of things which interest you, what are the things you'd like to get involved with, and you'd be amazed by some of the different things and the fantastic things that we do, a lot of which go kind of unnoticed and untriumphed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we've actually had another offer a little bit further down the chat from Olivia Wood too. So that's brilliant. Actually, and from the environmental water sector, working on wastewater infrastructure projects. So a very topical area for IMechE at the moment. So huge thank you. So I'm just going to check the comments before we go back. Brilliant. Yes, loads of great offers. So that's
brilliant.
That's definitely fantastic. There is a comment in there from Helen James. Helen James is the chair of our Education and Skills Strategy Board. So engineering education is a specialism for many members and volunteers. It is a discipline and community in its own right. As education is a priority for us, how do we see this represented moving forward? And Helen, I'm going to pause on that question until our next slide, if I may, which we talk a little bit more around education and membership. So it's a good chance for us to move on the conversation. But please do keep the chat going. So this area of IMechE, Pete, Graham and I sort of had a lot of organogram slides at this point, didn't we? And we were wondering how to portray this in a clean, efficient manner for this session. So we came up with sort of 6 sections on this. But if you want to encapsulate it all, what we thought encapsulated well was about lifelong learning, about how, as a strategic goal for the IMechE, we support and develop engineers and technicians, and throughout the whole life cycle, the whole route through that, what can IMechE do? What does it do? What does it need to do going forward into the future to really support engineers and technicians of the future? So we've unpacked them into 6 areas, as you can see there: education, training, membership, awards, mentoring and knowledge sharing. And I'm hoping those online will feel a part of one of those sections. I would hope. Please chat and if you disagree, but there's a place and home there for everyone involved with IMechE. So going back, I think maybe to Helen's question in the chat there, I think, you know, actually, Helen, if you'd like to sort of put your camera on and come on, because I'm sure you've got some really important points there. But education is probably the lifelong learning. I think education spans everything we do in some form. It's one of our policy priority areas for the IMechE as part of our wider impact strategy. But I think education sits at the heart of what we do. And I think lifelong learning is probably another way to express that. I don't know whether, Helen, if So Helen's point, my point is that it's not included in the list identified. Okay, no problems. Yeah, we'll bear that in mind. Helen, do you want to come on at all?
Sorry, we're just working on permissions, Joe, so give us half a sec.
Helen's really
Kirsty will get that sorted.
But just to unpack these just a little bit, Graham, would you like to talk a little bit around membership? Because I know there's at least 1,500, 2,000 volunteers just in that section alone.
Yeah, everybody who has engaged with the institution as part of registration, whether that be, you know, whatever different part of the organisation you're at, you will have engaged with the membership process. What a lot of people don't realise is how complex and involved all of that actually is. There's something like 12 or 1,300 people who are involved in that. I looked at, you know, if you want to get registered with the Engineering Council, 7 different registrants from within the volunteer community will have looked at your application throughout that process. So there's a huge amount of checks and balances that go on. This is not a box ticking exercise at all. There's a huge amount of process that's set behind that. It's very sophisticated. It follows a very set process, which we get audited by the Engineering Council on making sure that we're doing it appropriately. But it's a huge amount of fun to be had out of it. I mean, this is where I kind of probably started my volunteering journey, was within that part of, and as I said earlier, I found it really, really rewarding and came away from a day's interview, I have to say, absolutely knackered. But largely because of how much I'd taken on and the whole range of different things that I've been involved with. And I found that really, really good. And it takes up a day, but you may only do, you know, it's not even a handful a year. You probably find yourself doing 1, 2, maybe 3 sets of interviews. One of the things which we're working on at the moment is, can we just do half a day? Because at the moment, it's kind of like you sign up for a day. A lot of them are, I think they're all now done online. So being able to give access to people to be able to do those interviews is now a lot easier. And we're looking at ways of getting the booking system so that we can do it where you don't have to tie up, you know, a few hours as opposed to a whole day. But even withstanding that interview, there's a huge range of other things which happen within the membership group. I mentioned earlier about how we actually have to accredit university degrees. We have to look at what is our relationship like with our licensors. So we have 2 licenses. One is the Society for the Environment, where we can offer people SOC-ENV registration, or the main one we have is for the Engineering Council. But there's a number of people from the institution who sit on various committees within the Engineering Council, which is one of the roles which I do. So it's so broad. I think my suggestion is rather that we can describe everything, but if people are keen to try and get involved, have a conversation. I worked with somebody I knew professionally last year, and he said, "Oh, I'd quite like to get involved." Now he's recently become a member of the Academic Standards Committee, which looks at not specifically university degrees, but people who've perhaps got a degree from a university which we haven't been able to visit, or a number of people whose learning process has been in the workplace. And so there is now a large group of people who look at assessing whether people's learning, wherever that may have come from, takes you up to the standards appropriate for whatever grade of registration that you're looking to get involved with. So just another example of one of the many things that people can do. And you know, that particular guy had come from a business but also an academic sort of background, so that suited him really, really well. And he's just about to start his particular process within that part of the organisation.
That's a great example. Thank you. I believe, Helen, now we've given you a bit of control back and you can come on. Welcome, Helen. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, Joanne. You know, I don't like not being in control. So, yeah, I'm all stressed now. Yeah, lovely to be here. And actually, Graham's articulation actually has really covered some of my points around education. Because my point that I made in the chat is that engineering education is a specialism in its own right. So as a member, when I look at the industries, for example, whether it be aerospace, railway, whatever, education isn't on there, and yet we've got many, many members whose specialism is actually engineering education, whether that be further education, whether it be university education, whether it be CPD, private training. You know, how do you educate the engineers of the future? It's not just about being a technical expert, it's a whole discipline in its own right, and there's journals around engineering education. So I'm really keen that we kind of pull up, I think, and surface far more that academic, not necessarily the academic, but as I say, engineering education, and not have education simply, I don't mean simply really, but as a mechanism through the slide that you've currently got on, which is basically evidencing education is outreach work. And education is far, far broader than education outreach. Outreach is really, really important. And we've got thousands of volunteers volunteering in schools and communities around outreach. But actually, as influencers and professional engineers, we have a massive opportunity to influence curriculum, to influence qualifications, influence other professional bodies as well as our professional body through to the Engineering Council to make sure we are at the leading edge of what the profession should be doing. So I know there's quite a few points in there, and I think it's more about a direction of travel, Jo, about where I'd like to be seeing things move rather than necessarily where we are. Thank you for that.
And Helen, while I've got you, can I ask one more question, if I may? I think the board that you're chair of also involves skills. So I just wanted to maybe if you could say a few words around the skills side as well as the education, because I think that's an important part of the lifelong learning piece.
Sure. So I'm really keen on emphasising skills. So rather than I have done now, but because it's education up there, I rarely talk about education in isolation to skills, because skills is critical from nursery, primary, secondary, FE, universities, as much as anything, as much as the education side of things. Engineers need to be able to use equipment. We need to be able to interact. We need all the communication, etc., etc. And so a lot of the work on the the Education Skills Strategy Board is now really bringing to the fore that aspect of skills, and also focusing much more on engineering technicians, incorporated engineer. I think we do have a tendency to always think about chartered engineer, and I really, really, really want to broaden that dialogue out to make sure we're fully inclusive. So for me, skills, but you'd expect me to say this because I've got an apprenticeship background, that it is absolutely massively important. So you will hear me talking about skills as much as education. Of course, they're often interface. So when we're going out and crediting degrees, we will be looking at skills as well as the education.
So Helen, thank you so much for that. And that beautifully segues into one of the comments that Jack has made.
Well, let's have a look at Jack's comment.
I think what Jack has said there, first of all, thank you so much for actually flagging this up, because it is an issue. It is something that we within the institution need to challenge. It's something that I myself have had to do. And I think we should all be brave enough and bold enough to say that you don't need to be a CEng fellow in order to be a this or a that. Now, I can sit here and say, okay, sorry for you, Graham, because you are a CEng fellow. That doesn't make me any better than anybody. It just means I've been around a little bit longer. My example is that within the railway division, we have elections every year for board members. And I'm really pleased to say that I was able to encourage a developing engineer to put themselves forward for election, and they were elected. So, and to say there's nothing within the rules that stops that happening is a horrible way of looking at it. But I think you're absolutely right that we should make all of these opportunities available to everybody. There are certain requirements, particularly within membership, which I think are reasonable, that say that if you're going to interview somebody for CEng, you should be a CEng. I don't think that's challengeable. But for anything else, then absolutely, we should make this as open as possible. And I would challenge all of the various chairs, vice chairs, and people who actually sit within the governance groups within those particular parts of the organisation to rewrite the rules. Because if it says you've got to be an X or a Y or a Z, get rid of it.
Actually, I might put that out to Pete. So Pete, as one of the representatives on the International Young Members Committee, have you come across barriers during your journey with IMechE, and is there any lessons learned we can take away from that?
I think that the main barrier is the complexity of understanding the role you're supposed to be doing, the role that you can, how and why, and the kind of almost like the guardrails of the position you're in, or what you can do and how you get involved. But again, I think that I don't want this to be a bash the IMechE thing. I think that there are such a huge number of dedicated people that complexity is very easily solved by sending a quick message to your regional volunteer, kind of the regional chair or any of the regional committee who are really keen to get involved, and they're there because they're involved and they're really keen to see other people like you join up. Like, if anyone here is really keen to join up, I'm sure that any one of the IMechE staff or members or volunteers would jump at the chance to have you guys on board, because a new perspective is a new opportunity for everyone here. So that would be my kind of big takeaway, is that there may be some complexity, but there are so many people out there to help you demystify and open that opportunity up for you.
Thank you, Pete. There's a question in the chat aimed at Helen James. I don't know whether you've had a chance to have a look. Maybe we can answer that one offline a little bit, Helen. So just moving on, just on Jack's comment, when he talked about how long you can hold a position, he did mention about region and area committees. So I just want, it's a good intro to the next slide, I thought. So if we just move on to the next one, Donovan, please. Thank you. So just wanted to talk about, we talked about a bit about inclusivity and making an impact. And I think it's important for us to share that IMechE is very much a global community. In its footprint, we have members in just over 140 countries, and I think there's 198 countries in the world at the moment, but don't quote me on that. So huge footprint of lots of fantastic members, and also importantly, number of member groups. We've heard in the chat and from discussions today about some of the local centres in different countries, but we probably have around 3,000 or 4,000 volunteers in the network. So this is a global network, but all acting local. This is either on a regional basis, a national, a particular city, huge grassroots, fantastic volunteer groups putting on events all around the world at all times of the day. We talked a little bit in this morning's session about how moving on to online virtual because of COVID has actually broken down some of these international barriers. And I'd be interested if you feel that it's helped with the volunteering too, in terms of going virtual. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do today, perhaps as well as we have been able to if it wasn't for this move into the virtual world. But there's, I think I mentioned earlier around a lot of members get involved through the specialisms, but I also think this is a very strong route where an awful lot of people get involved at that local level and then have opportunities. I know, Pete, I don't know if the audience, you're based in New Zealand normally, not the US, but it'd be really interesting just to describe a little bit about the work that goes on in New Zealand, just as a flavour of international activity.
So there's, in New Zealand, a lot of the work is currently around kind of making sure that the expat members who are the kind of traditional members of the IMechE are part of the kind of are satisfied with what's going on. So kind of trying to run as many members events for those guys and kind of trying to do the learned kind of side of things. So it's kind of running events where sharing knowledge and information. And then from the young members kind of point of view, which is something which I'm a lot more passionate about because that's the kind of the area I'm most heavily involved with. It's quite tough right now because we are trying to build up a group of young members halfway around the world from the headquarters, and we don't have the same base and kind of the same core knowledge of the IMechE. So it's effectively a marketing exercise for working out how we can best target ourselves towards those kind of ideal customers of the services we offer. That's the kind of big thing for me, is trying to treat it almost like a business proposal and truly nail down what are the aims, what are the targets, why we're trying to do that. That's kind of what we're up to right now.
I think I'd just like to add to that, thank you, Pete, that perhaps pre-COVID, then it was all about having face-to-face meetings and being on committees in that structure. But obviously in this sort of new world we live in, those barriers for getting involved on some of our operating boards, on our governance board, advisory boards have diminished, which is fantastic, and it's much more inclusive. I think it's really important that the institution keeps that mindset moving forward, to have that real sort of diversity of thought and experience on all of our boards and committees across the IMechE. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think I was asked a question, and forgive me for not remembering which particular community was asked, but basically this person who lived in Germany said, well, can I get involved in that? And the obvious answer was yes, of course you can. And I think that's where the mechanisms by which we now communicate, and we've all become very kind of comfortable with them, as yeah, no, of course, you want, a lot of auditing is now done online. So whether that person's in Germany or New Zealand or California or the UK, you know, other than time zone challenges, then absolutely. I mean, what we found, for instance, within the railway division, is that we've opened up our ability to interface with people through COVID, and everybody got really worried. We're not going to be able to meet. Oh God, it's horrible. Actually, our audience numbers, if you want to use that horrible phrase, went up by 20% because we were able to interface with much more people. You know, I recall a number of sessions we had where there was guys dialing in from Kuala Lumpur. You know, this is something which we would have at 6 o'clock UK time, thinking, right, that's 8, bloody hell, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And that particular individual felt it was appropriate, and he was getting feedback or input from what we were doing at 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought it was really humbling. I thought, wow, here's a guy who's actually prepared to get up in the middle of the night to listen to the show that we're putting on, and that was great. And the challenge we've now got is to retain that, but also actually get us sitting together in a room whenever we can. And we've done a lot of work on what we call hybrid. And Ian, who's on the chat here, has been a big part of that, about how we actually can do the best of both. And that's actually been really hard. To sort of say, how do we do a bit of this and a bit of that? Going one way or the other was easy. Doing it together has been hard. But a lot of people have worked together, and we've now got what we consider a low-cost, workable solution. Is it as good as the BBC would do? No. Is it good enough? Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. It's a really, really good point. Before we close on the hour, I just wanted to move on slightly to talk about volunteering itself. So hopefully we've demystified some of it in terms of the structure and the types of volunteering you do. But if we go to our next slide, Donovan, I just wanted to talk about volunteering. I think I want to start off by giving you a massive thanks. We have such a fantastic volunteer community, and so for the ones who are on the call today, you know, a huge thank you. But I know that many people will listen to this session, and so I want to thank you to that whole community for such an inspiring, enthusiastic group, and who've been through some very difficult times around the world over the last few years. So first thing, I just want to celebrate you all for all the good things that you do. But I'd like to maybe take the opportunity for a few minutes to just sort of talk about why you've done it. We talked a little bit about this throughout the session, but I'm just really keen to sort of hear on the chat about why you've got involved, and why you keep staying involved as well. That retention's important. But I'd like maybe perhaps hand over to Pete and to Graham just to say, you know, what you've got out of it over the time that you have.
I'll let Graham go first.
No, on you go, Pete. You go.
Sure. Okay. So I think that there's for me, I've chatted a wee bit about the kind of the why I do it, and it's that education piece, which is one of the most important things to me, is that it gives me a part of my job which is very difficult to get elsewhere, and also gives me a huge sense of like personal satisfaction around being able to give something back. I feel like for me at least, and this isn't a generalization of other engineers, but for me, have had things pretty easy, and it's nice to be able to give back and level the playing field a wee bit for others, and that's a huge driver for me. Like, both my parents come from public service, and so being able to add a tinge of that for a few hours a week is huge, and that kind of is the base level of why I'm interested, why I'm involved. There's a huge number of other aspects in terms of kind of the career development, the networking, the less, the kind of the things that people would probably talk about less because it's less deemed morally good. But there's a huge number of those advantages. But the education piece is the most important one for me. That's the bit that gets me most.
Brilliant, thank you, Pete.
Right, fantastic answer, Pete. And there's a little word on there, which is probably one reason why I do this the most. I have great fun. I really enjoy doing it. I wouldn't put in the dozens of hours that I do if it wasn't fun. And, you know, I get lots of personal satisfaction from it. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that, you know, because we are doing this. We're not being paid. In many cases, it costs you money. And I've got no problem with that at all. And I just find it fantastic fun. And we shouldn't be ashamed of saying that I do it because I enjoy it. And I actually get something from it. And my wife thinks I'm mad. But actually, I really, really do enjoy it. And, you know, all the stuff up there is fantastic and it's all relevant. But if you ask me, you know, one single reason why do you do it? I enjoy it. And maybe that's a bit selfish. But I like to think, and others can judge, that I give a lot. But I do it because it's what I like doing.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a really nice note to start to conclude. We've got some nice chat in there as well, looking from John about why get involved to inspire the next generation of engineers. Ian saying in there around networking opportunities, helps me help others network, and great to work with people even like Graham Taylor and agree on the fun. So some great comments in there. And I think there's also the added value. I think certainly I can speak as a member of staff, working not only with volunteers, but working with engineers who are all about solutions, all about innovation, and that enthusiasm alongside, you know, all the reasons to volunteer, I think is a great match across the board, really. Just conscious of time, so I'm just going to finish up there, but please do carry on the chat for a couple of minutes in there. But just in terms of next steps, if I may. Firstly, I just want to really thank everybody who's come on today. It's been great to see you all, and thank you for your comments and your questions. Huge thank you to Graham and to Pete, all the way from the USA at 6 in the morning. So that's pure dedication for you. So a huge thank you for your support and running this session today. The volunteer conference is on all week for the next 4 days. So if there are any other sessions that you might not have signed up to or you're more interested, please do go to our website and the link is on the screen there. In terms of getting involved, for those who are already involved but maybe fancy a different role or doing 2 roles even, or want to try something new, please do either get in touch with myself or Graham. Our emails are on there, and there's also a generic volunteering email on there too. And I just want to say a big thank you for coming on board today, and I hope I'll see you for some sessions later in the week. Thank you.